What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the finale of my little build log series here for my water-cooled build in the Fractal Design Define Mini C. I'm going to start this off with just, while I've got the system turned on, just showing you guys how amazing this Mayhem's Aurora fluid looks. People are going to have some questions about it, and I'm just going to start off by saying this is my first build where I've used this coolant, so I cannot give you any advice coming from the perspective of experience. All I can tell you what I've read, and from my understanding, the effect that you're seeing is not meant to last for the duration of when you might have this fluid running through the system. So I don't know, 4 months, 6 months, not really sure what to expect. I guess I'm going to find out. But realistically, this is meant to be more of a showpiece. I've got Laclede's Land coming up this weekend, and it's going to look amazing then, and that's all I really care about. So I've designed the system in a way that it will not be difficult to flush and replenish the fluid when need be, so that's not really a big concern of mine. But as you can see, I mean, this stuff, I mean, it looks really good on camera, and it looks 10 times better in person. I mean, it is so impressive. I love the fact that you can just see the fluid flowing. You don't get that from either a standard, more translucent fluid, or even, especially the opaque or pastel fluids. Really, you don't hardly see any movement at all, if any. So I've talked about this in a previous build where people were giving me shit for not filling up a horizontal reservoir all the way, and I explained that I did that on purpose because I like seeing the movement of the water. And this just takes it to a whole nother level. I mean, who would have thought that the fluid inside your reservoir was swirling around like this? So yeah, it's awesome. I hope that anyone that's interested in doing a build like this is inspired enough to just take the leap and do it. The fluid doesn't cost any more than any of the other fluids, and the effect is just it's pretty amazing. So so yeah, I guess just to kind of go over the finalized loop here, and I'm going to flip the lights on and go ahead and kick the system off so that there's not conflicting lights here. But and then when you kick this off, you're going to see the way that the fluid just stabilizes. Now this eventually just settles, but when you first kick the system off, this stuff looks so awesome because you can still see the separation. But anyway, so I think in part 3 of the build log, the system was essentially built. I just didn't have any tubing or cabling, so I think that's all pretty self-explanatory here. The only thing that's really bugging me about this final build is the difference in the shade of blue on these ram sticks. These, we already had these, so we just used them. I actually tried to swap a different set of DDR3 in here that was silver, but I guess it wasn't compatible. I couldn't get the system to post, so I stuck the stuff back in here. So I'll address that at a later date if it keeps bugging me, but it's not horrible. Just kind of nitpicking at this point, but aside from that, I'm extremely pleased with the way this turned out. I like the color scheme that I settled on for my cables. The bright blue with the way the coolant turned out, it just looks awesome. I decided to go with a little bit of silver. I went through so many different ideas on this, but because the flake in the coolant is essentially silver, I wanted to bring out some more silver accents. So that's ultimately why I settled on this color scheme for the cabling, and I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. But other than that, I kind of talked about the way the loop was going to run in part 3, and it went exactly as planned. The only thing I might have changed if I were going to do this again is just for the sake of limiting the number of bends I had to do, I kept this on the same plane where it comes out from this fitting down here on the radiator, and it's pushed a little bit further forward than these other bends. This here and then this here are essentially on the same plane. This is pushed a little bit forward. I may have wanted to do a bend back and over so that these all met up in the same plane, but for the sake of time constraints, and you guys are going to see here hopefully fairly soon, while I was working on this, I was also working on 2 other water-cooled builds that are just as intricate as this one, and they all had to be done by this weekend. So I've been working nonstop on this stuff. This is why I've just finally gotten around to uploaded this final one here. So every time you introduce new complex bends into these tubing runs, especially when you're changing the plane, it's just more opportunity to screw things up. And I used acrylic in this one here, and surprisingly, I didn't have to rebend very many times. Actually, I think this might have been the only one that I had to rebend. So, I guess I can pat myself on the back. I've done this enough times that I've gotten pretty good at this stuff. But there's always that element. It's extremely frustrating. You got to do it one bend at a time, and then you get 3 bends in, and then you screw up the 4th bend, and then all of a sudden you got to redo the whole thing, and it, you kind of get mad at yourself, and it's frustrating. So, other than that, yeah, I mean, the bends are essentially perfect. Everything's parallel. I mean, it turned out great. So, that's pretty much the gist of what's going on. I mean, other than just kind of showing you guys the way this turned out, in the previous portions of the build log, I essentially went over everything that I was doing, and I essentially just did it and accomplished it. This is probably the first time you've seen the lighting, but I do have one strip here. As always, I use the dark side strips that use the rigid PCBs. I go with straight white LEDs, and then I hook them into a 3-pin fan header on the motherboard, and then I can adjust the brightness level. I think I have these running at 70%. I don't like running my white LEDs at 100%. It's just too bright. But, in this particular build, 70% seemed to be the right brightness to where it wasn't overwhelming, and I wasn't getting too many reflections off of stuff, because there's just no way to avoid, just because of the way LEDs are, unless you had some sort of diffuser, there's no way to avoid that reflection off of any of the tubing. I get some on the reservoir from the strip that's down here. So it's not the worst thing in the world. I'd be lying if I didn't say it didn't bug me a little bit, but that's just me being extremely anal about all this. So I'm going to go ahead and swing this around, give you guys a final look at the backside, see how everything turned out there as far as everything with the custom cabling. I did end up having to swap out my original. I underestimated how much power that was going to push out on the for the 4 PWM fans, and with the original fan splitter I was using, there was no dedicated power connection, and it was just acting funky. It just wasn't working right. In hindsight, I probably should have thought of that in the beginning, but I didn't. So swapped it out for one of the SwiftTech PWM splitters that I already had on hand, so I didn't have to wait to order a new Mod My Toys one. But yeah, aside from that, I got the final SSD in here. This wasn't planned to end up matching the build, but it worked out that way. It's not technically 1 terabyte, like 960 gig, but anyway, yeah. You can see a big difference it makes. Obviously the 8-pin connection is the only one that I didn't custom make and sleeve because I explained it in a previous build log. That was just for the sake of time. But every other cable in this build is essentially custom length, down to recutting and pinning all the fan cables. So it turned out really clean. It's real easy to get in and work in here. Now all of the hardware and stuff is hidden, but all I have to do is unplug these cables, move them out of the way. I've got my drain port here when I need to drain the system. So yeah, it's I don't know, let me know what you guys think. I'm really pleased with the way everything turned out. Considering how small this case is, and unless you've seen this case in person, it's kind of tough to envision. I had seen reviews on this case, and I was still really kind of surprised at the size when I received it. I didn't expect it to be so small. So, all I'm going to say in regards to attempting to do a loop like this in this particular case, Fractal certainly did not design this case for water cooling. If you really want to go that route, they've got excellent cases like the Define S or even the Define Nano S is going to be easier to water cool in than this. It's shorter in the front. They don't have all that extra space for radiator and reservoir support and all that. So it took a lot of work and a lot of fabrication to get this to all fit the way that I did. So I do this sort of thing and show these videos in an attempt to kind of inspire you guys to maybe think outside the box and try some things that you maybe wouldn't normally do. But I'm also just going to warn you that if you want to try and do this, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of frustrations involved, and things don't always work out the way that you think they're going to. I mean, case in point, the pump down here, that whole configuration changed so many times throughout the process. There was a lot of trial and error. Ultimately, the way it worked out was great, but I've also got, you can't even see it all, but there's so much money worth of just fittings just to make all this work. So that's another thing you need to factor in, is that, if you don't have these fittings on hand, sometimes you aren't able to make this stuff work. So just take all this stuff into consideration when you attempt a build like this. But again, other than that, I hope you guys like this, and if you have any questions or just want to voice your opinions like people like to do, just feel free to let me know. But again, like I teased out earlier, I have some other awesome stuff that I'm excited to show you guys. Right now I'm focused on just getting the rest of my stuff done and getting to the land this weekend, and then hopefully in the next week or so I'll have something else to upload for you guys. So you guys have a good evening, and we will see you in the next video.